So we're in the exhibition Journey to Japan with Jonathan Holstein. This exhibition was inspired by abstract design in American quilts, the exhibition he curated with Gail Vanderhoof back in 1971. And we wanted to sort of bring the whole concept up to the present day. So what we did was we worked with a group of Japanese artists, most of whom, all of whom, were aware of the Holstein Vanderhoof collection because it traveled to Japan in 1975 and 1976. So many of them got started, maybe partly inspired by Jonathan's quilts traveling to Japan in the mid-1970s. So we worked with them and said, hey, could you take a look at one of the original abstract design in American quilts and maybe respond to it in your own voice, using your own artistic perspective. And so that's the result here in this gallery. This is the first time Jonathan has seen the quilts. Today, yeah. So I just wanted to give him a chance to react and see what the artists were doing, how they reacted to his quilts. And I think we have a fantastic example behind us. This was made by an artist named Haruo Konishi, last name Konishi. So Konishi-san chose the Red Bars quilt that was in the original Abstract Design in American Quilts exhibition and used her very unique look. This is a technique and a form that her quilts often take, but I think she did such a fantastic job of replicating, not replicating, but referencing the bars in her own, using her own voice. And it's very elaborately quilted. She uses antique kimono fabrics. What do you think of it, Jonathan?
Well, the quilting is extraordinary. It's machine quilting, of course, but I mean that doesn't say so what. That's so what. I mean, can you get a nice close-up of that? That's just amazing. And I love her very careful inclusion of little natural images here and there. She knew exactly what she was doing, as did American quilt makers. The first exhibition we did at the Shiseido Gallery on the Ginza was phenomenal because Japan was unique in many of the world cultures in that textiles were given the same place at painting, sculpture as high art. So that was the idea of venerating textiles was not foreign to them. So at this first exhibition, there was always, the do not touch, do not touch, do not touch. And Japanese women just couldn't, they were, finally I said, take the signs down, let it happen. And they touched them very carefully. And it was a phenomenal reaction. And it went on from there in Japan, which was a great pleasure for us. Let's look at another one.
Yeah, this next one next to it is based on one of your log cabin quilts. So there's the original reference piece. And this is Yoshiko Katagiri. Katagiri-san, she has been a well-known Japanese quilt maker for decades. In fact, she won the very first Quilt Nihon competition. So that was the competition that was set up by Nihon Vogue and the Japan Handicraft Instructors Association by Mr. Seto, who I know you know. Knew very well. And so she won the very first contest, and this is her piece. She did actually see your quilts when they were in Kyoto, and she remembered that exhibition very fondly. I've spoken with her about it. Again, she uses some antique kimono fabrics very, very elegantly. She titled this piece, Mother, La Mer, and La Mer, of course, in French being the sea, and she says that it's in reference to the fact that the Japanese kanji, or the written character for the sea, it contains both the character for sea and mother. So she was saying that it references the fact that the Holstein Vanderhoof quilts are sort of the mother of Japanese quilt making.
Oh,
I love that.
I didn't know that. What I love about this is that she got the idea of the log cabin block, but did it all in black, but just with a more intense black center, which is very Japanese. And then she this wonderful image of a jellyfish under the moon, I also like she used the kind of chop that are used on Chinese paintings, which shows the artist's signature,
That's right.
which is really down there and up there.
Yep.
And what is that a title?
I think that's the title, and I'm pretty sure that is Yoshiko. I think that's
Her signature.
her first name.
the
Yeah,
chop.
I think so.
Yeah. And then she even did a very American thing of using a patterned textile on the border. This stuff. Which is,
Oh yeah, no, I'm sorry. This is her name, Yoshiko.
yeah.
I'm pretty sure, and I think that is
That could be her
the C.
symbol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kumiko Fujita-san, she was trained as a graphic designer, and I think you can really tell that in her exquisite quilt here. She uses this bold color scheme of red, black, and white. What I think is really wonderful is that she was referencing one of your favorites in your collection, the schoolhouse quilt. So it's in a very different color palette, but I think she still gets the spirit of the quilt really well.
Oh, well, I also like that she's added humans to the schoolhouse. but just balance on these points. It's really great idea.
That's a really good point. He looks like he's leaping from the tops of the trees.
Yeah. No, it's just a fabulous quilt. Amazing.
Eiko Okano is a quilt maker she was actually a student of Chuck Nohara, who was sort of one of the mothers of Japanese quilt making. And Okano-san, she's gone on to really explore the format of the uchikake, which is the wedding kimono. So this is, the title of this piece is It's a Beautiful Day, Volume 16. And we have several other volumes in our collection. But what I love is that she's referencing that very famous log cabin quilt that was on the cover of at least some of the catalogs for abstract design in American quilts. And she takes it, such an American graphic look, and she translates it into a Japanese format.
Oh, and this is a wedding kimono?
This is a wedding kimono. That's the look, or the format is. Which is, you can often tell by this padded bottom.
Yeah. Okay. So great. I love the log cabin references all through it.
Yeah, and again, she's using antique kimono silks.
Are they all silks or some cottons too?
I think there's a combination. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some cotton in here.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, fabulous.
This is a Rob Peter to Pay Paul quilt, and Keiko Goke, whose quilt is actually on the cover of our catalog for this series of exhibitions. She used her very typical bright, saturated color palette to respond to the original Rob Peter to Pay Paul quilt, which I think is it causes some sort of optical illusion in some ways. The reds and greens really sort of play off of each other in that original quilt, but she does such a great job of also making a visually just moving and very vibrant piece. What do you think of this one?
I love this, and this again is machine quilting, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Long arm quilting.
Yeah, I'm not sure if she uses a long arm machine or a regular home machine, but
It's amazing.
yeah.
It's amazing quilting, but the whole thing is just a wonderful, wonderful quilt. This, as Marion mentioned, this is interesting because of the visual play, but also I love the name, and I'm not sure why it's robbing Peter to pay Paul, but it's from Pennsylvania, so there's a good, a lot of their references are biblical. But again, it shifts, the values shift back and forth as they do on this.
Yeah, yeah. Again, I'm so pleased with how the artists responded to the original quilts and really used their own sensibilities to make a unique piece. Yeah.
This is one we talked about in the other room, and I'm amazed that this came out of that. Why don't you talk about it?
Yeah. So Emiko Todalo, she was so taken with your entire collection that she was inspired by the kaleidoscope to make this most left-hand strip. But you'll notice that some of your other quilts are referenced in here as well. So a log cabin, 9-patch, sort of Thousand Pyramids, Wild Goose Chase. She was actually looking at multiple examples of quilts from abstract design and American quilts.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, and I love the color palette here. Again, that black on black, it's so subtle, but rich at the same time, because there are shifts. It's not all just one black, it's many different blacks. Plus she's using silk, and so the surface shines differently when you turn the fabric. So I just think she's done a masterful job of bringing together many different quilts from your exhibition.
I'm not surprised this was made in Japan.
What about it says Japan to you?
Well, the use of textiles like this and the shifts in color values and things, I think, are very Japanese.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
And what's this one?
So this one was made by Yasuko Saito, and Saito-san, she took the color palette of the Rainbow Bars quilt, but really transformed it into this exuberant, almost wild, soaring composition. This is sort of a hallmark of her style. She loves to do these wide sweeping arcs of color. She too likes to use antique Japanese fabrics, but her color palette is so much brighter and almost wilder than some of the other Japanese artists. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's a fabulous quilt, just fabulous, and so different. You know, the fact that they could draw on their centuries of sensibilities in art to create these, which are unlike anything else that you've seen.
Now, I will tell you that she is one of the few artists, maybe the only one in this exhibition, who was not very familiar with your collection, because she didn't start making quilts until she was in her 40s, so in the 1980s. So this was after your quilts had been to Japan, and she was immediately drawn to contemporary art. So antique quilts were never really her area of interest. So I like that she chose the quilt that she chose, and that she did such a great job with it.
Are these specific visual? Yeah, they're arrows.
Yeah, I'm not sure, I'm not sure.
They are, because there's the notch, there's the feathers and the notch.
Yeah, I imagine she has quite a stash going of fabrics. Shizuko Kuroha, who I am sure you have met, she's sort of a grande dame of Japanese quilt making. This is really her color palette, her choice of materials. Again, antique indigo dyed fabrics, but she loves complex pieced patterns. So I was actually surprised that she chose the fairly simple 9-patch. I was expecting her to pick something much more complicated, because that's her own work.
I'm delighted she picked that.
I am too. And I love that she didn't just repeat it. She used her color palette, but she also, just the way the reds pop on the original, she has these lighter colored fabrics that really start to dance off the surface of the quilt in the same way that they do with your wool quilt. So
you said something nice about that centering.
Yes, that's right. So one of the blocks on here really starts to sort of move off the surface due to the value contrast.
It's a centering device.
And then I think she's referencing it there with that one small block that, due to the value contrast, it really starts to sort of almost levitate.
Is it also a kind of signature?
I don't think that's a signature of hers, but it makes sense to me. It seems to fit her style in some ways. Okay. So Shoko Hatano, she's a very well-known Japanese quilt maker who has shown quite a bit in the United States as well. I know she's been involved in Quilt National many times, the major contemporary quilt exhibition in the United States, in Ohio. So I love the way she responded to the Crazy Quilt. The original Crazy Quilt, of course, was made with wool fabrics, and wools have that deep, rich sort of undertone to them. And she uses that same subtlety, but then she also uses these lamés that really sort of pop right up. And I think that is a signature of hers. She often uses those shiny fabrics, but I really love that contrast. She gets so much texture in there.
What I like about this is the really brilliant interplay of painting and piecing. You know, there's piecing here, and then there's the painting that picks up those values, and you're not sure which is, and very Japanese brush painting in here.
Yeah, the whole thing looks to me a bit like calligraphy.
Yeah, well, it is to some extent.
That's right. Suzuko Koseki, she chose that string piece antique quilt that has lots of beautiful like feed sack and early 20th century utilitarian fabrics in it. She chose to use fabrics that she often turns to, and that's fabrics with words on them. She really likes to use words in multiple languages. You often see English and French. You actually don't see Japanese as often. She loves to mix and match them, and she loves that sometimes the words serendipitously end up in interesting combinations. So I haven't necessarily found any words in here that are particularly interesting next to other words, but it's interesting to find, you know, certified by Indiana Crops. And I don't think any of these are necessarily antique, but they might be.
I like the feed sack.
Yeah. Oh, and here's some more, 25 pounds sugar. So I think some of she mix and matches antique American fabrics with new fabrics. And
St. James Palace.
Yeah.
It's great.
And what were you going to say about the original quilt?
I've always loved this quilt. It always looked to me like rain coming across windows. And, you know, again, it was, you know, one of those days in Pennsylvania. Quilt, oh my God, quick, put it aside, next.
I never thought of that. I love that metaphor of rain
Slanting
streaking down.
across windows.
Yeah,
That's a
wonderful.
favorite quilt of mine.